Welcome to the Morning Slice. Hey guys, your host here, Brianna McNerney, and I am so excited to bring you our second episode of the Morning Slice, and I have another guest to introduce you to today. Her name is Momoko Schafer, and I had the pleasure of meeting Momo. Oh gosh, it was probably a year before the pandemic started. I guess I tell time based on its relation to the pandemic at this point. But we actually met, well, I had the pleasure of being in the audience while Momo was on a panel at the Corning Museum of Glass talking about a show that she was on. Maybe you've heard of it, called Blown Away, which is a competition reality show about glass blowing. And I just find that to be so unique. I love how Momo has like this really eclectic combination of experiences that we just had so much fun talking about. But anyway, I was in the audience while she was on this panel, and luck would have it that my friends and I went out to enjoy a beverage after we left the panel in the museum, the glass museum. And yeah, as luck would have it, Momo walked in and sat down right next to me, and I couldn't help myself but introduce myself, and we proceeded to have a hours long conversation that I at least really enjoyed. And I remember talking with her about dreams, like actual going to sleep and having dreams, and how she had created this really awesome series of earrings inspired by dreams about one's teeth falling out. You have to check them out. I will link everything in the show notes. Yeah, they're called the Dental Dreams series. It's so cool. And something that Momo said about grief really stuck with me, about how every night when she goes to bed, she has a little moment of grieving the day that's ending. And yeah, I don't know. I just had so many moments that were memorable, and thankfully, Momo and I stayed in touch, and she agreed to come be a guest on the podcast. So that conversation is what you're going to be listening to now, and I appreciate you being here. I'll see you on the other side. Hey Momo, how are you today?
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. So before I dive right into the questions I have for you, which I'm so excited for all the things we're going to talk about today.
Same.
Yay. I am going to pull a tarot card for us to kind of line the container of our conversation.
hmm
So let's do that. And for you listeners, the deck I'm using is a Dreams of Gaia Tarot by Raven Felon, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, but I will absolutely link to that in the show notes. Oh, how interesting. So this card is, I think this is the Three of Air. This is really pretty.
Ooh,
Can you see this okay?
yeah, yeah. It's very shiny.
It is very shiny. You can see my whole screen along with it, but
That's wild.
I wonder what you're noticing about the card.
I'm seeing like this like smoky dragon swooping in.
Mm.
Ooh, there's so many fun things on the desk. Very relatable. I always have a ton of things on my desk.
Oh my gosh, me too. I was just frantically clearing off my desk before we
hmm
got on the call today.
I like the key around their neck.
Hmm.
This is beautiful.
So I'm gonna actually get out the book for this one. We're going to the book, which I did not do last time in our interview with Matt Raymond Goodman, but
Mhm,
I am going to do it today because I don't think I've ever pulled this card before.
mhm. Is this a card you've been using for a long time, or the deck rather?
This deck, how long ago did I get this deck? It might have been about 2 years ago at least, but it's a
Wow.
big old deck.
And you've never pulled this card.
I've never pulled this card before. I know. It is a monumentous occasion. And it's a really cool looking card. So again, I'll link to this in the show notes and hopefully I can get an image of this card as well. But we've got a person standing at a desk and they look kind of like an explorer almost type of person. They've got a cape on and a key around their neck, as Momo noticed. And we've got angel wings too, that they're like, they look like angel wings, but they're kind of dark. So
Hmm.
I'm noticing that. And as you said, there's a dragon, like kind of a smoky dragon swooping around, and an owl on the book.
Hmm. The book is glowing.
Yes, this open book that the person is holding is glowing like gold. And there's almost, is it like, I'm seeing, I don't know if you can see this, Momo, but it's almost like there's little hieroglyphics or something like that that
Yeah,
are.
there's like a ring around the person and a ton of symbols. Yeah, I'm not familiar with these symbols at all. Like I would assume because it's like a dark background with some speckles, like it has something to do with astrology or something like that. Or
Hmm.
alchemy, maybe it's like a recipe book that she's looking through.
Oh, I love that. I love that witchy vibe. And I love that you bring astrology into it. It's a very like education is a word that keeps coming into my mind as I look at this card. Because there are books, and this person is clearly studying. So maybe like an alchemical education, like
Mm-hmm.
a magical education. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
and the first word that comes up when I read the description, the keywords of this card are education, talent, study, willingness, guides, teachers, comprehension, communication, and perception. And I love the key phrase, expand your mind, which is what we're all about here
Mm-hmm.
at Slice Inspiration and here the Morning Slice. Every experience offers a lesson. Education is a lifelong process. Learning aids comprehension. Lessons we repeat until we understand. Learning transforms talent into skill. Don't kill the messenger. And ignorance is nothing to be proud of. Which Momo and I both laughed because we were just talking about that before I press record, that ignorance
Yes.
is nothing to be proud of.
Yeah. Oh, this is a great card.
It really is. It's so perfect for us. I'm excited.
I'm just realizing, oh, I didn't realize those were wings. I thought it was like darkness and then like a portal behind her head where her hair's like flowing out behind. Okay, that
That's
makes more sense now.
cool. But I mean, I'm always down for a good portal.
Hmm. I think it's also interesting the skull because it does bring another element of like life or death or, that something has happened before, but it's
Mm,
sitting on a pile of books.
yeah.
Obviously,
And
those books are worth reading if there's a skull on it.
I love that. I feel the same way. Well, in the skull, it brings almost like a dark element to the table. You know, what most people think of as dark. And something that's coming to mind for me as I look at this is the middle path, something that we were just mentioning also in our conversation before I hit record about there's a lot of gray area in life. There's a lot of things that aren't cleanly black and white
Mhm,
and light and dark,
mhm,
and sometimes oftentimes I find my favorite place to walk is that middle path.
Yeah.
That is kind of the union of the two.
Hmm. Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because, you know, if you live in a world where everything's bright and shiny all the time, you don't realize like what's supporting all of that.
Right?
There's only lightness because there's also darkness.
Right. It's funny, this is kind of a light oh my gosh, and I shouldn't say this because it's a Good Place spoiler. It's a like a TV show spoiler. So spoiler alert. Why do I just say that? If you watch The Good Place and you haven't watched the most recent season all the way through, then don't listen to me. Just skip ahead a little bit. And but I was just watching an episode of that last night where they went to the truly good place. Do you mind, Momo? Do you watch this show?
No, I watched like a couple of the first episodes out of curiosity. I heard so many good things about it. It's a cute show. It's a really cute concept.
It is. And so they in this episode that I watched, they went to the truly good place, like the best place. That they found that everybody were just happiness zombies, that they had just experienced so much good and that they had access to everywhere in the world and anything that they
Yeah.
wanted, that they were just walking around like zombies. And the rules had gotten so strict that nobody had entered that was new in like 500 years. So
Oh my goodness.
I know it's really funny, but I think it lends to what you say, and something I absolutely believe as well, that if we are so focused on and so focused on the light that we're unwilling to accept the harder parts, you know, it can lead to some stagnation that isn't
Hmm.
truly that's not true happiness. Like the true vibrance that I think of when I think of being generally happy is a full acceptance of all of the things. It's like a flexibility to move between all kinds of different experiences.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, because like if you don't have like a broad perspective, a broad understanding, like how are you ever gonna level up?
Right.
Or even like if you don't understand that you're surrounded by all all these great opportunities, and how do you even experience gratitude
Right.
if you don't even understand that what you have is good?
Right. You can't understand it's special if it's just like the only experience that you have.
Yeah, that like all this greatness is just default.
Yeah. Which we do live in a pretty great world, huh? We've got
Yeah,
running water. We're meeting over the internet right
I
now. Like,
know.
it's pretty magic.
I know.
This is amazing. So, okay, I think that I'm ready to dive into the questions I have lined up for you. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Hey. So, one of the things I love about you, which is very silly, but anyone who knows me will understand why, is that you're from Boston, and that's where you are, based. I
Hmm.
love Boston so much. But
Hmm.
that being said, you have spent many summers in Japan, I understand from your
Hmm.
website, and I'm so interested to hear how that happened, like what were you doing in Japan, and this must have influenced you. I would love to hear how.
Yeah. Well, first I want to hear like what's your impression when you think of Boston, and like also what's your impression when you think of Japan? Just so I have context of like how much you know about these places.
Sure. So I would say that I'm relatively, low knowledge about Japan. I've never been.
Hmm.
Boston, I actually was born in, uh, well, right outside of Boston. I lived there until I was about 12.
Mm.
Then I spent middle school, high school years in upstate New York, where I live now.
Hmm.
but I also went to college in Boston and worked in Boston for years. So I've kind of like split time between Boston and where I'm living right now in upstate New York. And for me, when I think of Boston, I love Boston. Since I was a little child, I loved going into the city with my mom. She worked in the Copley Mall. They had like business suites up at the top of the mall, and
Mhm.
anybody who knows Boston knows that that's right downtown.
Mhm.
And I just loved getting dressed up to go to work and go into my mom's office with her, ride the train into the city. And there was just like this electricity that I felt in Boston. But it's still pretty accessible. Like it's small, it's not a big city like New York.
Mhm.
And there's a vibrance. When I think of Boston, I think of like I call Boston my mothership a lot. I It feels like when I go there I'm plugging in to
Mhm.
something that feels amazing. I love the rocky beaches all along the coast. I'm just like a New England girl, right?
Mhm.
So back to Japan, I'll say I've had several friends who are Japanese, like were raised in Japan, so I know a
Mhm.
little bit from them. But I also, when I was a young child living outside of Boston, I participated in a Japanese exchange student program. My family
Oh,
did.
cool.
So we would welcome, I think we had 5 exchange students come and live with us
Mhm.
during summers that were from Japan for, so it would have
Mhm.
been like 5 years of my life as a kid. So
Mhm.
that's pretty
Yeah.
influential. And you know, I would always I just loved having them, and we would do summer camps and things like that. So I learned to write a little bit in the language Japanese. Like, is it different? Because, you know, it's been so long since I learned about this stuff that I don't
Mhm.
want to misspeak, I guess. But we learned to make sushi and things like that in the camp, and you know, we would have some activities with our exchange students, so there's a little bit of history there, but my
Mhm.
knowledge is still super basic.
That's still more than probably like the average American, right? Like having actual interactions with Japanese people, living with them, learning from them. So,
That's probably fair, yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was born in Boston. I lived there until I was like 3-ish, and then when my sister was born, my family moved out to the suburbs, so just outside of Boston, like 20 minutes away. So that's where I actually grew up. It wasn't in the city proper, right? So, and then how I ended up spending time in Japan was because my mom's Japanese and her family's out there. So in the summer, we would just go there for the whole summer. And I would stay with my grandmother in the town that my mom grew up in. And I would even actually go to school as a transfer student because their school year is longer than ours. It's 200 days. So there's only like 1 month of like summer vacation, basically. So I would be going to school during my summer vacation. And
Wow.
so it's funny, like kind of looking back at it now, and like it's this wildly unique experience that I just like fly to the other side of the planet and spend a summer there and, just dive right into a completely different culture, right? Like it's if you ever get a chance, you should absolutely go to Japan.
Oh, I'm there. I would love to. Once we can freely travel again without all of these COVID things happening. Oh, I'm gonna be jet setting all over the place. But
Yeah, I mean, right now Japan's borders are locked down that like even I can't get in right now.
I'm so sorry.
So nobody's going to Japan anytime soon, but
When they open back up, we're gonna be in line. Let's say it that way.
exactly. I totally recommend like for anyone because it's also such a like safe and organized and hospitality is a thing. Everybody will, for the most part, people will like be very gracious and greeting foreigners, knowing that Japan is such a particular place that no Japanese person would ever look at a foreigner expect to know the language at all, or like they yeah, most people wouldn't project any assumptions onto a foreigner. If anything, be like, oh my goodness, a foreigner is here, they're
Yeah.
definitely lost, or they definitely need help, or so that's kind of the attitude. And everything, especially after the Olympics, I'm sure there's so much more infrastructure in the city that it'll be really easy to like just look at the signs and figure out where you need to go. So
It seems
yeah,
like a magical place.
yeah, I mean, whether it's for food, for design, for art, fashion, like you name it, there is just so much to see that you can only see in Japan. So
Yeah, well, and that's where you had your first experience with glass blowing, right?
oh yes, I was probably like 11 or 12 years old when my mom brought me to a craft school of some sort. It's like a kind of a place up in the mountains where they offer different lessons, like 1 day workshops where you can learn to paint or use clay, or something like that. And there was a workshop for glass beads, so it wasn't glass blowing, but it was working with molten glass myself.
Nice.
And what's funny is like I really wanted to work with metal, and I wanted to sign up for like a silversmithing class, like making rings.
Hmm.
And but there wasn't enough slots that I could sign up for that. And so I was so upset that I couldn't work with silver, because I really loved like silver rings and stuff like that. So I was so upset that I had to take the glass bead class. Like I was not even interested.
I love that. I love that story so much, but the universe stepped in and
And
said,
so
"No,
like,
you're working with glass."
yeah, so I was like, all right, I guess I'm working with this blob thing, whatever. Like thinking it's just like not as like intricate and like beautiful as what I could have done in metal. But like obviously as soon as it's in my hand and I'm melting things, I'm asking questions and I'm learning about it. And I'm like, wait, this is actually kind of cool. And I was kind of suspecting, like, I feel like there's more that I could do, but like any workshop, there's like point A to point B, you're gonna have this rod, you're gonna wrap this color, da da da. Like there's a step by step that they just bring all the students through. And so I was like, what if I add this? Or what if I do? And they're like, no, 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 just we're making beads right now. So like stick to the beads. Like this is what we're I was
You
the
had
difficult student.
questions. I can relate to that. Yeah, it's amazing. Well, and speaking of being a student, I'm so curious to know, did you enjoy going to school in Japan?
Oh, yeah. I mean, oh, how do I even answer that? It's,
It's a big question.
yeah, because it's just, well, it was also so long ago.
Yeah.
And so it feels like a distant dream that I'm like trying to remember. And um, there were definitely some moments that I think were super informative and educational, but it's school still, also still school. And so, there's competitiveness with other people or social dynamics or things that like I didn't know what I was getting into, because I'm only there for a couple months, right? And people know that I'm only there for a couple months. So I think like my social interactions were really different in that way, that like the teachers weren't like really trying to get me to do all the assignments, because they know like it's not like I need this transcript to send back to where, like, this is all just for experience. And then also same thing with like making friends, like even though I want to make friends, like we all know that I'm only there for a short minute and then I'm gone again.
Mhm.
And then I'll be back next year, but only for a couple months again. So I was definitely like just an in-betweener in a lot of ways. And also just being a foreigner and like one of the only foreigners in the school, it kind of made me like an instant celebrity, because they were like, that American girl, like, look, she speaks English and Japanese. What? Like being biracial and being half Japanese is such an anomaly that, it's a concept I would have to explain to people, because they're like, you're not Japanese, because they look at my face and think that I'm white. And then when I speak Japanese, they're like, whoa, this white girl speaks like really well. Like it's such a trip for them that I have to explain my existence of like why I can't speak and all that.
Necessarily the most fun thing to be doing all the time, especially for a young kid, I'm sure, trying to explain your existence. Most of us
Yeah, I
adults
mean,
are still working on that.
yeah, definitely. But I would say like, I mean, people got it after, I introduced myself to my homeroom and how classrooms are structured. It's 40 people in one room, that's your class, and the teachers rotate. So you're with the same 40 kids for the most part for your whole school year, aside from like gym, sports, whatever, like outside of the classroom. But for your like math and writing and all classes, it's just your homeroom.
Mhm.
Even lunch is in your homeroom. So, it wasn't too hard for me to like kind of come around and explain myself to those 40 people. So it was more just when I interacted with other people during recess that they'd be like, whoa, oh my God, you must be the American girl that I've been hearing about.
That's fun. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, I can only imagine. And so I'm curious to know, I guess I have one more question. If there's anything else that you noticed that's a lot different, strikingly different about Japanese schools than American schools.
Yeah, a lot. I mean, even when you first, even like going to school, everybody walks to school,
Mhm.
and you have kind of like a bus stop almost, where the neighborhood kids around that stop would meet up together and walk together to school.
Hmm.
So somebody kind of takes attendance, like one of the seniors would kind of take attendance and to make sure everybody that's supposed to be there is there. Oh, so and so is sick, they're not coming to school today. Okay, got it. Okay, everybody is here. And then you walk together, kind of like pair it up. And so
Oh,
even just that, it's like a huge sense of community right from the get-go that like who's there, who's in your neighborhood, like there's full knowledge of that and that where they're at, how old they are, who's their sibling. And then you walk to school, and when you get there, there's all these cubbies, and you take off your shoes and you put on slippers. So it's like these other shoes that you wear indoors.
mm.
So you keep your school clean. It's like a second home. So you take off your shoes, put them in the cubby, you have your own spot for that.
Aw.
And it's like basically first through sixth grade was the size of my school that I went to, Sagamihara. It's yeah, so even my sister, my cousin, like they were going to the school, but it's so big that I pretty much would never see them when we're different sections of the school anyway.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so from first through sixth grade, I went to the same school, and it's also, man, how do I like even lunch would be different because your homeroom, you would take turns. There's a chart of different chores, and so people would take turns. Like, all right, this week, this group of kids are going to go to the cafeteria and get the food, bring it back, set up the tables and stuff in a way so that it can be kind of an assembly line style and serve the food to the other classmates. And everybody does this job at some point, and then once everybody's done eating, collecting all the dishes, bringing it back to the cafeteria. And like every time you walk into the kitchen, you thank the workers that make the food, you thank the workers that are cleaning the dishes. The students are the people who clean the schools. Like there's definitely like janitors that like fix things and stuff, but in terms of cleaning, we're the ones wiping the floors, wiping the hallways, wiping down the sinks, the bathrooms, everything. So
Wow.
it really is a second home, and you respect it as such, because if there's a mess, it's either you that's cleaning it up or it means that a classmate is cleaning it up.
Yeah. Wow. I really love that approaching school as a second home. It
Mm-hmm.
just feels so cozy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no wonder to me, I kind of assuming this about you, but it seems like you really love learning.
Mm-hmm.
And it's no surprise to me that if you had this experience of having a place of education being like your second home, I wonder if that influenced your love of learning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm always a curious person, and I think I'm also curious to always think about, like, is there a better way to be doing this? Is there a better way to be serving my community, the people around me? Now that I'm an educator, thinking of like how to better serve my students and be an educator, being someone who takes education seriously. Yeah, this definitely influenced just the ways that you can establish community, establish respect, um, establish responsibility as well and expectation. It's just so vastly different from what we do here, where there's like food fight in the cafeteria, things like that. You know what I mean? It's not the same.
And that's like the fun ideal,
Yeah.
right?
There's also like a lot more like social freedom here, which was not a thing in Japan. Like there's certain things you can't do, can't say. You can't pierce your ears and bring that to school because you could get in trouble. No makeup. Like there's uniforms. So everybody's wearing like similar things. Like once you get to a certain age, or for gym class, everybody's wearing the same gym outfit. Like so there was definitely still a lot of conformity, but also, I mean, we know there's pros and cons to that. Like uniforms just alone is an interesting conversation of like, oh, it kind of brings everybody to the same page, but then does it bring everybody to the same page? So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything, right? And even like with people respecting education in Japan and valuing education, um, it still is, I mean, to kind of Japan isn't a utopia.
Right.
Like people really like to put Japan on a pedestal and say like, wow, it's so zen and chill and like all this stuff, but it is pretty high ranking in suicide rates. Like
Mm-hmm.
same with like Korea, like it's so if it's gonna be like number one in so many things, but also suicide, I think that's a very clear indication that something's still not right. Like people are still very competitive, and because it's so much more of a group mentality versus American culture, which is very individualistic. um there's a total different power dynamic there in like the amount of pride but also pressure there is in the work that you put out, or how you're engaged with the people around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. Well, I've had a couple of friends from Japan, as I mentioned before, and I know something they'd expressed to me was about how strict it is and
Yeah.
how much that led them to want to be in America, right? And be kind of free to do whatever the heck they want, wear makeup,
Yeah.
just kind of do their thing. But I'm also curious, and then I promise I'll get us back on track because I have so many things that I want to ask you. But I wonder what you're noticing, what you've seen, if you have any guesses as to what might be contributing to a higher suicide rate there. Like, you're somebody who definitely thinks a lot about self-love, and we'll
Mhm.
talk more about that later. But I wonder if you like what you notice about this. It's a big
Oh
question,
man.
and you can pass if you want. I I'm definitely very suicide has been a central thing in my life as well. It's something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. So that's why
Mhm.
I'm curious to know what your
Yeah.
perspective is.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think there's like one answer for all the suicides, but I think, a general trend that we see in suicides among people is the feeling of not having another choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're living in a society where you only see people living certain ways of life and trying to fit into only so many boxes, and if you don't see yourself fitting into that box, or the box that you tried to fit into, you failed
Mm,
or feel like you failed, um, that can send you into a spiral, because if your whole identity was relying on that,
mm-hmm.
then, that extreme sense of guilt, shame, failure, like that can really weigh heavy on you.
Yeah.
Um, and also, like, mental health is not something that's talked about in Japan. That's very taboo to like say that you're getting help.
Yeah.
So that's like, if you don't even think about like therapy as an option, or that there is a spectrum of happiness and sadness, that it's not just like life is okay, and then if it's not okay, then it's like over, then
Yeah, no, totally. It makes a lot of sense what you're saying.
yeah, because yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that are strict, like social norms that are really strict. Like, just to give you an examples, like even just my sister and I riding a train, and people are staring at us, obviously because we're mixed race, or just foreign looking people. And I see people staring at me, and so I just wave. I'm like, hey, what's up? Like, just kind of acknowledging that they're looking at me. But that confrontation of me even saying, like, just waving,
Mhm.
just, I see you, like, what's up, being friendly, smile on my face, really sends people into like chaos, because they're not used to even that confrontation period. The
Yeah.
fact that I acknowledged what was happening, and that they were like looking at me and noticing me and just being like, hey, what's up? They were like, oh my goodness, she just like looked at me and then like waved, and like that just happened, and like that alone is jarring.
Yeah.
And like that's really hard to relate to in American experiences, because like strangers will come up and do weird things or say weird things to me all the time. Like, people are very much more expressive and free in that way, so it's people come up to me and say pretty much anything, and I probably just shrug it off, right?
Yeah.
But someone waving at someone in Japan might throw them off.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's a very different way than the American way. People will come
Yeah.
up and do some pretty weird stuff, won't they?
I mean, there's just, yeah, this could be an infinite conversation, because, as many people describe Japan, it's kind of like its own planet. It's its own island, a bubble. So there's just so many things that are particular to Japan. Even for like, COVID, Japan's like an example where like COVID didn't really like hit Japan that hard, or and like just they there's so many trends where Japan is an anomaly in so many statistics. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's a really fascinating place.
it really, really is. Well, I wonder if they're so used to, doing things for the collective that it was very easy for them to just kind of follow the recommendations that were being made.
Yeah, even just like looking at Japan's history, you can see how, uh, like for example, World War II,
Hmm.
how some propaganda was enough to get the entire country on board with taking over the entire planet.
Yeah.
Like, that's like a very intense kind of collective mentality, to be like, we might be a small island, but we're just going to take over the whole planet.
That is a very interesting dynamic. Like
Like
we
that.
legit might have to schedule another 3-hour interview just to talk about Japan.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to do another trip to Japan as soon as possible, because I haven't been back in years. I want to make more art about it. I want to, blow glass out there. There's so much I want to do. So if I end up doing that and you want to do a virtual
Oh my
podcast,
God,
like, while I'm
yes.
out there
What
too,
would
like,
be even better is if I could get my butt out to Japan and we could do an in-person
what?
podcast in Japan.
Oh my
We're
goodness.
manifesting it as we speak. I would love
Yes.
that. And I want to hear more about your glass blowing. So my next question is about Blown Away. Uh, because when we
Hmm.
met, so Blown Away hadn't quite been released yet, but you were done filming at that point, and so there was a lot of excitement about like what the experience was going to be, and you just kind of weren't sure. So I would love to catch up on that. Like, how was it for you when Blown Away was released? Congratulations, like, fill me
Thank you. Blown Away is a TV series that also was put on Netflix as a Netflix original series about glass blowing. So it's a glass blowing competition. So 10 contestants, and there's like a major winner, who, and the grand prize is was a $30,000 prize package, including a residency to the Corning Museum of Glass. So um, yeah, I mean, it was the first TV show of its kind. There's never even been a TV show about glass blowing for some reason, which blows my mind. There's been like, those like how it's made episodes, but not just full on, this is what glass blowing is about. So just knowing that, I knew that this was a huge opportunity. Um, but with it being a reality TV show, I was a little like, I don't know. Like, I had just graduated college and had been like in my industry for a couple of years at that point. So for glass people, that's new. That's like super new, super, I'm just like a little sprout at that point.
Mhm.
Like, is launching into a reality TV show like, is that the move? But also the reason why I'm even just kind of assuming that I was gonna get on the show was because I was being scouted.
Oh, wow.
Like somebody had reached out to me, the casting director had reached out to me about being on the show, which again kind of made me even more hesitant because I'm like, of all glass blowers, why are they reaching out to me? Again, like, being a super fresh face in the industry, like I don't have a reputation or a crazy, like I'm not known in my industry. I'm not famous. I'm not gallery represented. I'm not in a museum. I don't have those things under my belt. So I was just like even more suspicious.
Totally. Well, in the glass blowing industry, it's like there's a big community around glass blowing, and people literally spend
Hmm.
their whole lives as glass blowing artists, and there's like prestige is kind of important in the community, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you growing up in Corning, like, oh, I'm curious. Okay, first, before we get into glass, like, what is your understanding about glass? Like, you living in Corning and being around the museum, like, how much do you think you know about glass?
Well, I'm again, I'll say that I think I would claim to be a relative novice, and I will probably show that I might know a little bit more just because I'm a very curious person too. So being around it, I ask questions, and my partner actually, he works at a glass factory in the area,
Mm-hmm.
and I've definitely picked up some things here and there about how it works. I wasn't very interested when I was in high school about the whole glass blowing scene, but I find it a
Mm-hmm.
lot more interesting now, and I have more friends now who are really linked into that,
Mm-hmm.
because again, it's such a tight knit community really all around the world, is what I understand of the
Mm-hmm.
glass blowing community. I have friends who can, very easily they'll go visit a different country and just kind of stay with glass blowers, and that's like a normal thing for them to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that element of it. And we do have the Corning Museum of Glass here, which is, from what I understand, a world renowned. I mean, it's a huge landmark. Is that the right word? A huge kind of hub of the glass industry.
Yeah.
And of course, Corning Incorporated. Am I answering your
Mm-hmm.
question?
Or just glass art. Like, what have you noticed with glass art? Do you see any patterns or trends or?
I mean, originally, I think I noticed how many, like smoking devices are made out of glass. That's the first
Yeah,
thing that you'll
valid. Totally
see
valid.
in like any, glass shop, I guess. So if when I think of glass shop, the first thing that I attached in my mind was like smoking devices,
Right, a head
people
shop.
make. Right, exactly. And now, I think my understanding of glass art has evolved quite a bit. And part of why I'm so excited to have you on is because I love what you bring to glass art so much. Like, a much more intricate and like delicate approach, but still useful. Um, I like that.
What point do you think like your understanding of glass art changed? Was it very recently that you knew more about like glass art?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, you know, so this is kind of funny, especially as somebody who lives in Corning, New York. I think that when I saw you on that panel at the Corning Museum of Glass,
Mm-hmm.
that might have been my first time into the at least that event, because if I'm not mistaken, that happened during a 2300 degrees
Yes.
event at the
Yes.
museum. And for anyone who's not from the Corning area, the Corning Museum of Glass opens up during the summer months. They have like these outdoor spaces, and they'll bring bands in, and kind of everybody's just hanging out in a glass museum having wine and, watching live
Mm-hmm.
music. And on this particular day, there was a panel where Momo was speaking, and then, thank you universe, we happened to meet afterwards. But honestly, I think like you have had a huge impact on shifting the way that I think about glass. And you know to something that's a little bit more, and that's why, again, why I'm so excited to have you on, is because I love expanding the way that I'm thinking about things, and I know that you bring that to your glass working intentionally. So that's why it's so interesting to me. But I think it was very recent, because I thought of like uh glass that is useful. So I guess the usefulness of it was like the original
Mm-hmm.
perception that I had, if I really think about it. The
Mm-hmm.
smoking devices, like there's a purpose for
Yeah.
that.
They're
And
functional objects, yeah.
exactly, in the way that Corning Incorporated, they make like Gorilla Glass, for instance, like glass
Yeah.
that has a purpose. Um, but my perspective, yeah, it shifted. Yeah, you had a huge role in that. So thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you saying that. That's like really good to know actually.
It's very true.
I guess yeah, it's kind of hard to like shift your perspective on glass art when yeah, your preconceived notion is that it's functionality, or it's that it's for industrial purposes, or yeah, like it's because it definitely does serve those things, and Corning is known for that, inventing and reinventing different types of glass and different uses for glass. I mean, that's the reason why we even have smartphones with these nice clean screens, right? So
Right.
thank you for that,
Yeah,
Corning.
thanks, Corning.
But yeah, it is also interesting to see like where that kind of trickles out into art when people are using it creatively. And I definitely notice a lot of patterns in glass where people are kind of repeating things that have been done in history. So things that we see in the textbooks, things that we see in the museums, because the art of glass blowing as like a performative act, turning a pipe and all of that, like that in itself is something to get wrapped up into. The process is so fun and beautiful. It's a dance. You figure out this choreography and you're twirling around with different people and bringing different parts together and making this beautiful shiny object in the end. And
Yeah.
um, I think for me, like I love the process and I love the history. I love everything around it, the craft, the art, all of it. But for art, I think part of what I struggled with, especially because I am somebody in the craft, it was really hard for me to pull away from just the technical aspect of it and to go back into my conceptual parts, because it's so easy to get wrapped up into the subculture of glass where people focus on if you can or can't see your punty mark, which I'm sure most of the listeners have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's basically like the belly button on your piece, the last point where you're holding your piece.
Sure.
And to like yeah, try to like hide the illusion of the process or whatever, like that's a whole different game in itself. And it doesn't necessarily help the concept or the perception of the final product. So it was really hard for me to pull myself away from that because I am an artist first and foremost, and glass is what I use primarily to make my art, or you know, so far in my recent career.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think glass blowing was a way for me to like kind of publicly prove that like I know how to blow glass, that I can blow glass. But it came at an interesting time because I was also trying to redefine myself as an artist specifically. And when people assume that I'm just a glass blower, that's the only thing that I do, it can actually hurt my reputation because people assume like, oh, so she must make bongs. She must make. People ask me if I make windows or cups or like things like that, functional things like stained glass or whatever. Um, and I have done, some of those things. I have made functional objects. I have done stained glass restorations and all kinds of stuff, um, but that's not what I want to be doing, right? So yeah, Blown Away was this like unique opportunity where it was me showcasing glass blowing and also trying to make art with glass and putting ideas out there. Yeah, it was such a sweet opportunity.
Very cool opportunity. Well, and what I'm hearing and what you're saying is a little bit of resistance almost, or like friction between the box, if you will, of the glass
Mhm.
blowing industry and what good technique it looks like and what's always been done and what's been proven to be useful,
Mhm.
and the artistic side where like you want to make your own artistic choices even if it's not necessarily what everyone else has already proven is like the right way to do it. And
Mhm.
if I remember correctly, there was a little bit of friction even on the show about the way that they judged around that. I don't know if it's
Mhm.
appropriate for me to even bring this up, but I mean, I felt you on that one. I'm like, just let the girl pick her own colors. Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was a constant point of friction on the show, I would say. Obviously only 20 minutes per episode, so not all of our conversations aired, but that was a very frequent conversation, whereas the push and pull of like, so is this competition about technical abilities, or is this competition about the success of this product outside of this glass bubble, right? Like our us glass blowers have a perception of what we deem as well made and good or whatever, but how is the average person that is going to come across this think and feel, and what would they appreciate?
yeah.
I'd rather focus on that because there's way more just people than there are glass blowers.
Yeah, no, it's true. And glass blowers, they do, from what I can tell, have a very specific way of like thinking and you know, analyzing work, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And I could tell that the main host, Kathy Gray, she definitely had her internal friction as well because she is a conceptual artist herself.
Yeah.
Um, I was familiar with her work even prior to going on the show, so it was interesting to see like knowing her and knowing her past, and she's like glass is something she studied from many different angles, and so it was really unpredictable to see what she would prioritize. And sometimes she would give really specific technique criticism, or even critique on people referencing historical designs, like well known like Italian designs and things like that.
Mm.
um, and I mean, she like criticized my color choice, which was like not technical, right? Then it's like her taste in visual or aesthetics, or so it was really hard to predict like what she was going for. And I think it shows that she did feel the pressure of representing the entire industry and the entire industry's opinion on
Yeah.
what's good.
Talk about pressure.
Yeah, so I honestly I didn't take too much of what she said personally, in terms of what she did or didn't like about my piece, just because I knew that it wasn't just her speaking for herself. She was really trying to represent the glass industry as a whole, and that's just a
Very
lot.
difficult to do. We're all humans, we all have our own hang-ups, and every day can be different. I can only imagine how challenging that was to create pieces to be judged, and it's difficult to predict exactly what is going to be important on a given day. um
Hmm. Yeah, everybody like wakes up on the different side of the bed, and you don't know, and you just gotta roll with
Totally.
it.
I love that. And something that I'm noticing, which might seem kind of like an offshoot, but I think it leads into our next question kind of well, is I've come to think of this as a millennial mindset almost, in the best
Hmm.
possible way, that we come in and want to do things differently, do things better, perhaps, more
Yep.
efficiently, with different goals in mind. We want to put our own spin on things and see what we can do to improve what already exists. And
Yep.
take things further than they've been before and try new things. And I think that that mindset can create other types of friction in the world, with people who might be a little bit more firmly rooted in the way that things have always been, and the tried and true way of doing things. Do
Hmm.
you have anything to add to that thought? Because it keeps coming into my mind.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, I guess what we were talking about, I can't remember if this was before our recording. Yeah, I think it was before our recording. But like you have to go to somewhere new in order to learn and grow. You have to, I mean, we all know that you have to step out of your comfort zone. I mean, glass blowing is already outside of most people's comfort zone, but there is a point where you can kind of hit a flow or kind of hit a rhythm and end up falling into a pattern. And then that repetition can hinder your growth and innovation as
Yeah.
well. I think that's something that I've seen a lot of people kind of fall into, the place where, wherever they feel comfortable, and then kind of it's okay to like hang out there, and there's nothing wrong with, that if that's where you want to stay. But as an artist, it's really important to continue to grow, that you continue a conversation, because as an artist, what you do is you create conversation, you spark that.
Yeah.
And uh, what's that saying? Like, comfort is the killer of creativity,
Mm,
where, obviously not, I'm not saying like you should be like uh like struggling, but that, yeah, again, that routine, if you fall into a routine or some level of stagnation,
mhm.
that it does kill your creativity, because then you might be making the same thing because you're just thinking about the same thing, talking about the same thing, and you're not adding to the conversation.
Yeah.
You have to push boundaries, and that's something that I'm very conscious of in glass, because um, there's so much history that I could fall back on and just keep talking about history if I wanted to. Um, but I really want to shape our future and our culture and the way we think about it. Something that I was super conscious of going onto the show was being true to myself. It's sounds super simple, but by being as authentically true to myself, I can never look back at what I did and regret it. Like, I was 24 years old when that filming happened, and I'm 26 now, and everything I made, I think, still stands for me, because it's authentically myself. That's who I was in that moment, and that's what was important to me. And at that point, like, I was feeling a lot of pride in like who I am and being Japanese, and I made a lot of work about that. And that's something I never got to do when I was in college, because I didn't feel like I was in an environment where I was able to talk about those things without being having to then present my homework to a classroom for a critique, and like,
Right.
and I cared about what my classmates would think, because I have to spend the next however many years, however many semesters with these people, versus like this glass blowing reality TV show. Like, it's, I was like, this is just like a passing moment, and this is who I am, and just being true to myself. I didn't care if like some of the comments were ignorant to my culture, ignorant to my intentions, that I was really doing it for the people watching. That's who I was thinking of. And I know that there's other Asian Americans out there that don't feel comfortable sharing that part of themselves. And since I had come into that place, I wanted to just fully, love that part of myself and put it out there.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for showing up that way for us to witness, because that's part of what I love about you, is that it does come through that you make decisions that feel true to you in the moment. And
Mhm.
I support that strategy 100%. I think that's a great go-to. And it comes through in your work. And so I'm curious to know, you've talked a lot about pushing glass blowing into new places. We've talked about like the expansion of this. And so I'm trying to wrap like two questions into one here. So I know from your work that part of how you're always pushing the edges, and you actually just said this too, it's you're trying to inspire. It's all about how the people receiving the art is receiving it, and like what it is inspiring for them, and the conversations that it's inspiring for them.
Mhm.
And I would love to know what kinds of conversations you're trying to inspire with your art. Like, what are those conversations that are important to you? The pieces that are coming into mind are the dental dreams earrings and the crystal cavity earrings. Oh my gosh, you have to see these earrings, listeners. They're so beautiful. And I will link to them as well. But that was a concept I just fell in love with the first time that we met, and fell in love with again the first time I saw them. So maybe you can riff to us about like how those are pushing the conversation. What's so important to you about that? What inspired those beautiful
Yeah.
earrings?
So, Dental Dream, it's basically a series of glass teeth that I've made, and they look realistic enough that people do confuse them for real teeth. And basically, my inspiration for it was the common recurring dream where people think that they're losing their teeth or having sort of teeth problems in their dreams. This is something that a lot of people can relate to,
Mhm.
and that some people have often again and again because it's induced by stress, anxiety, all those things, like the feeling of not having control. Um, there's also a lot of other interpretations, especially in different cultures, where it means that like that that it's kind of like an omen, like it's telling you that something's going to happen, or someone's talking about you, or someone in your family is going to die, or there's a lot of different conversations around it. But for me, it was really just talking about that dream, and by confronting that fear, that nightmare basically, and manifesting into a reality by having just extra teeth. um, that was my way of taking control. And by bringing that dream to the forefront of my consciousness, so that when that dream happens, that maybe I can wake up in that moment and realize in that moment, oh, it's a dream, this isn't real, like I still have my teeth or whatever. But also I love that people would confuse my glass teeth as real teeth, and kind of what a beautiful object to create out of glass. And then also, I love the way that it blurs that line of reality versus dream versus memory. It's this like, is this real? Is this what I think it is? Like, yeah, I think some people don't believe me when I tell them they're not real. They're like, those are, I don't know why you would say. And I'm like, oh, they're made out of glass. And they don't know what glass art is or glass blowing, any of this. They're like, what are you saying? But those are teeth. What do you mean that they're glass? Like,
So funny, like their mind has a hard time conceptualizing that they're not real teeth.
yeah, exactly.
Because that's how
So,
beautiful these are. Like they really do genuinely look like real teeth.
or some people will be like, are you a dentist? Like, I'm just collecting people's teeth. Like,
That would be weird, but I mean, to each their own. If you're out there collecting
Yeah.
teeth, by all means. I mean, hopefully it's not abusive in any way. It seems like that desire could quickly go south, get dark, but
Yeah.
I'll wrangle us back from traveling down that road ourselves. I really think that that is beautiful, like a beautiful play on reality, a beautiful way to take control. I love the way that you've taken content from your dreams and so literally used it as the inspiration for your artwork.
It is like by making objects like this, it does spark conversations around things that I do find important.
Yeah.
Because when people ask me, like, oh, why did you do it? And I get to bring up dreams, those of us who are interested in dreams can have that shared moment and talk about that. And even for those who, maybe don't remember their dreams or whatever, it's still an interesting thing to think about, like to really critically think about your mind, your subconscious, like why your brain simulates different experiences. And in a way, like those things are still taboo, like talking about mental health or focusing on your own health, on your own mind. Like these are things that sometimes are too scary to think about for people because they don't like to basically like look in the mirror and think about who they are and who they're becoming.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I've shared with you one of the things that I love about talking with you is bringing those more taboo conversations into a more fun place. I don't know about you listeners, but I love talking about dreams. And I
Hmm.
think that there's just so much useful stuff that we can learn about ourselves from spending a little bit more time with our dreams and being a little bit more open to talking about it. I freak people out sometimes when I want to talk about dreams. Not everybody is into it. Have you noticed that at all? That people get freaked out about
Oh
this
yeah.
whole
Oh,
idea?
oh, definitely. I mean, the fact that like most of my art's inspired by dreams is kind of hard for me to avoid when people kind of get to know me.
Mhm.
I mean, so for some people, the reaction varies from just like their eyes just glazing over, like because they don't relate to it, which is fine, whatever. But yeah, there definitely are some people that are like, this girl's weird. I don't know where she's going, which is, fine too. Like that's not their frontier, and they're more in the present and they want to think about different things, and that's fine. Um, I would say for most people, especially those who are, like to be in a position where they're educators or be in a position where they have meaningful impact on other people's lives, I think they realize the value of introspection.
Mhm.
And so even if they don't dream, that they're open to the conversation about that because they're curious people and they want to know my perspective.
Totally. And that's who we are here, truly. It's a fun conversation. I'm always
Yeah.
open to it.
Hmm.
Well, and so I'm really curious to ask you about another piece that I've loved witnessing, which is, and tell me if I'm getting a title wrong, but the Prejudice is a Disease
Yes.
project that you have done. And you probably worked with a photographer on that.
Yep. So Mel Tang, one of my really good friends, she's also based in Boston.
Amazing. And we'll link to her in the show notes as well. But can you tell
Hmm.
us a little bit more about that project and, yeah, fill the listeners in who might not have seen it?
So earlier this year, right when all this pandemic stuff was happening, um, it was kind of like a turbulent time because no one knew anything about it, didn't know what to do, didn't know the protocol, was just realizing this flu is a respiratory thing, that we should be wearing masks. And I guess this ties back into my experience in Japan, but wearing masks was not like a foreign concept to me. Like that's just everyday etiquette in Japan.
Hmm.
And I always understood it as like a preventative thing. Like it's just you're being considerate of the people around you, which is why you wear a mask so that like you're not coughing on other people or breathing on other people when you
Right.
think you might be sick or might be carrying something or whatever, right? People wear them for a variety of reasons, hiding a pimple, whatever, it doesn't matter. But like,
Sure.
so it's like wearing a pair of socks kind of thing. Like it's choose your flavor, long socks today or not. Like, but since it was not part of American culture, and when Asian people living in America knew that this thing was happening, I think a lot of us just did what we understood as the polite thing to do and wore masks. And also because some people were calling it the Kung flu or
Oh my
Wuhan
God.
virus. Like,
Yeah.
it just really accentuated how like Asian looking people wearing masks was blown up to be this like poster child of COVID-19. Like that, like Asian people equal the virus. Like that this is it was such a very obvious connection to the point where I mean, frankly, like dealing with racism isn't new to me. That's something that I've dealt with my whole life, no matter where I go. But this was something new in that racism was an everyday thing now. Like, it wasn't just somebody calling me a chink and, like, whatever. Like, to me, whatever. Like, that happens. It doesn't affect me at this point because it's just like, oh, whatever, just a stranger just blurting out weird things. Like hopefully he gets a therapist someday. Like that's kind of my reaction to it. But
Oh my God. And there are some Boston drivers, man. They will shout things out of their cars.
oh, it is unreal out
Yeah,
here. Mass holes are like a real thing.
they are. Continue.
Like, but yeah, so after this disease though, after this virus was a thing, like even just going to the grocery store, like I would just mentally brace myself because people would see my face. Like I would be socially distant or whatever, just doing my own thing, minding my own business. But as soon as like they saw my face and gained some awareness that like I may be Asian or something, they would freak out. They would literally like flinch, jump, run, whatever. Like just like it was an obvious reaction because there's other people in the grocery store, but it was me who they feared. And like, come on, we all know why. So it was just really jarring to see how little it takes for people's prejudice to just be exposed. And even if it wasn't prejudice, that people who are frustrated and unhappy and whatever will take this as an excuse to exert that hate onto somebody and yell at a stranger and, just, yeah, it's a really ugly thing to see. And so just being an artist, like I was saying before, I was like, I have to say something about this. I have to do something. I can't not acknowledge this thing that's impacting all of us. And as much as I would have liked to have made this out of glass, I went with this like translucent lace fabric and I created my own mask. Um, Not for functional purposes, obviously, because it's not filtering or anything. It's like you can see through it, so it's very porous fabric.
Mhm.
So I carefully like hand stitched this delicate fabric into the shape of a mask and decided I wanted this image of like, here you can see my face, like to personify the person, to make me not anonymous anymore, but to still see that I'm wearing a mask, and to get people to think about like who's wearing the mask, why are we wearing masks, like what purpose does this serve, and really push forward that conversation rather than like just running away from seeing an Asian person wearing a mask. And so I called up Mel, the person that I like knew would be perfect for it, to like document it well, make it look professional, make it look good so that people want to lean in and investigate. And I decided that we would meet up at South Station during rush hour, so there'd be like maximum number of people behind me on their daily commute, just kind of as the background, because it's a normal thing for a person, as I experienced in Japan, for like a commuter to wear, because you're going to be in close proximity, sitting in a train next to somebody. And if you might be sick, that's the time you should really be wearing a mask.
Mhm.
So, so that was to put it into the context where I understood it. And I was just doing it for the photos so that I could share that on the internet and have that circulate so people in their own private time could see those photos and take it in and think about it. You know, it wasn't like for a performance necessarily that like I'm making Boston commuters see me. It kind of ended up being a little bit of that because like we're doing the photo shoot right in the middle of rush hour, not in the way, like kind of we found a way to like find the right angle for that, but yeah, there were definitely, even while we were shooting, people were giving us dirty looks or scowling. One person even yelled at us and was like, your mask isn't gonna save anyone or something like that. Or like,
Wow,
you know, like
really?
so so I knew that I was like hitting on something, and sure enough it blew up, got a ton of publicity. The Boston Globe published it. I had a bunch of people interviewing me. A magazine asked me to,
Congratulations.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, a magazine asked me to write an article about it. So I knew that I hit on something that was really important and timely. And like this was also like a perfect example of like me being an artist first and foremost, not just a glassblower. Like it's still shiny and translucent and glassy. Like my work is always gonna have influence from my background in glass. But if I had tried to make that same mask out of glass, it would have taken me so long. I would have missed my opportunity because I think less than a week after doing that shoot, we went into lockdown. Everyone worked from home. Nobody was commuting anymore.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah, you really took the idea and ran with it. I feel like there's so much we could say about how important that is to
Mm-hmm.
really act on the inspiration that comes to you when it hits.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's just another example of just listening to your gut and saying what's important to you. And just that alone will present like an important and meaningful conversation because it's not just me doing it for attention or something like that. Like I had my own convictions and um yeah, I think that's something that even if you're not an artist, just in life, that's like a good thing to practice because um it's a good way to share what's on your mind so that people know what you're going through. You know, I think a lot of people assume just based on who I am and what their preconceived notions of me, like, oh, she must have like such a great life, like she must be smart, successful, stable, you know, she must be rich because she was on TV or all these things, but that like these everyday things still affect me. That like every time I step out of these doors, I can be confronted by a racist and like something really ugly could happen to me.
Yeah, I'm sorry that you have to deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, hopefully together we're all gonna change with this movement that's happening right now, that we're gonna keep the ball rolling in this conversation.
Oh
So,
my gosh, that is, what we're here for. So I guess that leads perfectly into another question I have for you, which is, and we're kind of already touching on this, but how do you see the coronavirus and the current civil rights movement, the like political social environment in our country? There's so much
mhm.
going on. And it seems that you are a great example of creating impactful art in the moment as these things are going on. But I wonder what you're noticing about how all of this is impacting the landscape of glass blowing and being an artist in general.
Yeah, I would say because of the pandemic and everybody having to stay home, they're not able to socialize the way that they would like to, unless they want to pretend this pandemic doesn't exist. um, so they really have to turn to entertainment, whether it's like on social media or TV or whatever. And so now more than ever, artists are in such huge demand, entertainers, personalities, streamers, all of that. Um, Yet, like, there's not that many like paid opportunities for me right now, right? So it's this stark contrast in demand versus like the support that I'm really getting.
Mhm.
Like I'm not selling much work aside from like the Crystal Cavity fundraiser. But otherwise, like I'm not selling sculptures. I don't have access to a glass studio. Like I'm not blowing glass right now because hot shops are either closed or they're only open to certain people. So yeah, mm, it's a hard one. It's a hard one for sure because I feel I can see the demand and I feel the need to kind of fulfill that and be a part of the conversation people want me to be a part of. But at the same time, I have to protect myself and be realistic about what I can put out. Like, I'm not gonna start a TikTok just because I know people would like me to.
Mhm.
But, I'm also not in a place where like I'm promoting like a new design to sell or a new sculpture to sell or anything. So I'm in a really weird limbo. It's like being unemployed without having the option of even looking for a new job right now. Like I was supposed to move to San Francisco.
Oh, right. I forgot that that was in the works. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had started packing everything up, thinking I was going to move to San Francisco. I was going to work at a museum as a preparator, like building installations, and then the pandemic hit. So I didn't make it out there, but at the same time, I'm not stuck with San Francisco rent without
Oh
a
my
job,
God.
right?
You
So
imagine that would have been awful.
yeah, imagine me like finally making it to the West Coast only to be like, oh shoot, I'm gonna be homeless.
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, San Francisco, you got to imagine. I don't know what they have in place for the homeless population there, but you definitely wouldn't be alone. Let's just say it
Hmm.
that way.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I can express my gratitude
Mhm.
for not having done that, and that I have family and that I'm able to lean on my family and through their support, like just I'm housed, I have a place to sleep, I have enough money to cook whatever, like that I've never had this much time on my hands to read, to exercise and do all these things. Um so I'm trying to keep my eyes on like the positive aspects of all of this, and that I this is time for me to I guess some people say like sharpen my knife and prepare for the future, and continue my writing, continue learning new skills, and learning video editing and stuff like that. I'm making content for Patreon right now.
Nice.
So it's an exclusive platform for people who are invested in me, to be able to see my work, see what I'm up to, see what the behind the scenes and everything, and to learn more about me. Because something that I'm conscious of is like I can't give myself completely away to the public when like the pub like likes and follows don't pay my bills. And I'm not a clout chaser. Like I'm not doing this just because like that fuels my ego. Like that's not what drives me. um and for me, it takes a lot of energy to stop everything I'm doing, my creative process, to pull up a camera and figure out the lighting and make it look good and capture it and explain to people. Like, I don't like doing that process. So if I'm going to do that, I only want to do it for the people who really care and who really want to know. Um, but still make it, accessible. Like, you can pay $5 to join and see all of these videos.
Sure.
Not all of them, but like each tier has its own different content that it gets, and so that's kind of where I'm trying to find my navigate and figure out like the future of what will be my sustainable future.
Yeah, it's such an interesting time. I think you're hitting on something really important and something I've been noticing in my own life lately. Even it's like how we support each other and receive support. And uh, as an artist, what I hear is that there's a huge demand and almost this expectation that's been created in our society that we will meet that demand, even if we're not
Mhm.
feeling resourced to do it.
Mhm.
Just with the promise
Yep.
that, like, maybe you'll be resourced after you do this. Like, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. But either way, they're doing it for fun, right? Like
Right. Because, like, oh, well, how great it must be to create art all the time. And,
yeah.
yes, of course, it's great to create art all the time. But, you also gotta eat. You need to keep
Exactly.
the roof over your head. And
Exactly.
if we don't have these basic needs met, it becomes very difficult to produce anything of, uh, you know, anything that is full of the love that I think you and I are both trying to put out into the world.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, this touches on what we mentioned earlier. What was it? Like, comfort is a killer of creativity. Like, I'm not talking about not having food,
Right.
but like, yeah, that you do need that push, but also like not that kind of push. Like, that's not the kind of push that, like if I had access to a hot shop, then I would be blowing glass, right? So like basic needs need to be met, but glass blowing is so expensive. Like it's $300 for me to rent and hire an assistant. So $300 to start any project or even just doodle around, like you gotta have expendable resources. I'll just leave it at that. Like you gotta have some expendable resources, otherwise like there's no way that you can do that without hurting yourself. And it is unfortunate that we live in a society where this idea of a starving artist is the norm.
Yeah.
Like that you it's romantic to suffer for your art and to not be able to eat because you're so desperate to try to manifest your art.
Yeah. I love that you brought that into the conversation because my mind was there too. This starving artist idea. I would love to think that we're moving in the direction of breaking that image.
Hmm. Yeah, that's hard to say. I feel like in some ways yes, and in some ways no, right? Like
Mhm.
Instagram is a platform where in the beginning it was a visual platform. It wasn't about really interacting, commenting, any of that. And so it was a platform pretty much for visual people,
Mhm.
photographers, whatever, artists, right? And eventually it got to a place where it is today where there's like blue checks and competition and likes and clickbaity stuff and advertisements, and it's veered so far away from what it was for artists, but it's still essential for artists to have them. Like,
Mhm.
there's a saying like, either you're so successful that you don't need an Instagram, or if you don't have an Instagram, then you're doing it wrong. Like, because that's essentially a free place for you to post your art and share your art and gain people's attention. But how are you supposed to get the attention that you're looking for when you're competing against like influencers or whatever that are like, posting whatever, yeah, like just content that takes away and distracts from potentially good content or wholesome content, educational content.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's hard because I think more and more people are becoming more sensitive to what they're taking in on those platforms and are starting to tune in and invest on the things they really believe in.
Yeah.
But it's it takes a lot of practice to be conscious while you're scrolling through Instagram, because I think a lot of us can relate to having those bad habits of just mind-numbingly scrolling and not thinking and feeding into the social media beast. So,
Yeah. There's so much to this because on one hand I'm noticing like we have this culture where somebody could look really shiny on a platform like Instagram as though they may
mhm,
have transcended this starving artist ideal,
mhm,
but that
yeah,
cannot very often be just an image.
absolutely.
And part of what it takes to break that, I think, I hope our society is moving in this direction. I feel like the earth is kind of demanding it of us right now. But, as artists, I think we need to be surrounded. And it's not only artists, like artists, spiritual guides. I have a friend who I talk with this a lot about, how the the spiritual guides of a community used to be just like taken care of, kind of sit
Yeah,
in your hut and like people come to you and you're fed and you have all your needs taken care of. And then
yep.
in turn, you provide this to the community. And we don't have, like, we kind of veered away from that as a culture. And it's led a lot of very important, wholesome, as you said, like those providers, creators that connect us to something bigger, something divine, like art does.
Mm-hmm.
As a society, I think we need to put a little bit more of our attention into funding, supporting those pursuits in a real, appreciative, intentional way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling.
I guess something I want to also add to, financial or just like general support for artists.
Mhm.
Um, I always wonder like what art would look like if it didn't depend on having it being sold.
Mm,
I think that really influences the product when like we have to also sell the product, right? The fact I'm calling it a product, right? Like that's
right.
I think that's something to really think about is like that with the way that our society is structured right now, if I'm not making money off of my art, then I can't really make art, right?
Right.
So when it's such a direct relationship there, um, people can take that in different directions, right? Like how many people like kind of competitively make art for the sake of making money, that art money, because sometimes that art money can be good, right? Like if you get the right intersection of like ideas or colors or whatever and like really kind of tickle people in a certain way, you can make money off of it.
Yeah.
But what if your art's not like shiny or like it's not just about pleasure and like luxury and all those like things that might attract people. Like I'm thinking a lot about like what my art would look like, outside of, capitalism. That if I didn't have to sell this as capital, what would it be?
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of times where I'll make something or I'm thinking about making something, and then it crosses my mind like, oh, that would be impossible to ship. If I can't ship it, then I can't sell it. And then I'll stop right there and never even create the piece.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, that's like what I used to do, but I'm thinking about it now because I'm like, wow, like how many things did I not never manifest because of that?
Yeah. It's a sad thing to think about, really. It's happened to you. It's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to many creative people, that hold
Totally.
themselves back because there is one green thing that makes our system turn right now.
Mhm.
And, I think part of the biggest change that's happening in our society is this start to question, like, what would a society look like if we changed this, if we extricated money as it looks right now from the system, because it's become this uh, really oppressive energy for a lot of people.
Mhm.
And that's not what money's all about. It's not what it should be all about. I don't think money's catching a real bad rap because of the way that it's been started to flow through our society.
Mhm.
It can also be such a great resource to create amazing things with. I love where that question is leading you.
Mhm. Yeah, because like money could be a really flexible point system, but right now it's got a very distinct flow in only so many directions.
Mhm.
So, yeah, there's just not enough that's being flowed to like communities who need it,
Mhm.
communities that are underrepresented, undersupported, all those things, um, or to artists who could be evolving this culture in a better direction by inspiring people to move in a better direction.
Yeah, and it really wouldn't take that much. It's like, you know, we're starting to see, especially with everybody needing to stay home because of coronavirus. It's like, should the amount of money somebody makes really determine whether or not they're able to eat? Should it really determine whether or not they're able to be in a safe space to sleep at night? Should it really determine whether or not they're able to receive health care? Like,
Mhm.
is that really the society that we want to build? Because we all pump a lot of money into people who make enough money to
Mhm.
resolve all of those problems. I don't know. We could be doing a better job than we're doing. Let's just say it seems to me that that's a pretty clear thing, that something ain't working.
Mhm. I think there's a lot of Americans who see people who have like done well in the system that we have right now,
Mhm.
and in the back of their minds they're hoping that they're going to win that lottery
Yeah.
and like become that next billionaire or whatever. And I think that hope, that kind of like misguided hope, is what allows people to kind of make excuses for that, because they're secretly hoping that they'll be them. But then also on the flip side, when we look at, like, for example, homeless people, it's so unfortunate how people who are also struggling but not homeless will look at homeless people, and they would be so quick to point at a homeless person and say, "What did they do wrong
Right.
to end up homeless? Why is it that they don't have a job? Why is it that they're not holding their weight? Why is it?" And but they would not redirect the same criticism to people who are doing so well, if maybe not too well, you know? Like, they're not gonna question someone like Jeff Bezos, who's making billions of dollars in the middle of this pandemic, making so much money. They're not gonna point the finger at someone like that, but they'll point down at a homeless person and say, like, "Do they really deserve food stamps? Do they really deserve my help? Do they deserve shelter?" When, like, why that's not where their attention should be directed.
Yeah, it's like we're all climbing over each other for a small amount of resources at the
Mhm,
bottom, instead of joining together,
mhm,
lifting each other up, and demanding better for our society. And
mhm,
we have a lot more power than most people give ourselves credit for in our dollars.
mhm.
We made Jeff Bezos a billionaire. So, like, there's a lot to be said for intentionally creating and funding the society that we care about moving forward. And I really wish, I hope that this can inspire even one person to think a little bit deeper about what that might look like. I have a feeling that our listeners are probably thinking about this a lot already. And I love you for that. I love you for that. Keep thinking about it. Keep fighting the good fight. If
Yeah.
there's anybody who's trickled through who's like still just not quite sure, do we need to, do anything about this wealth gap, or is it just that the homeless aren't working hard enough?
Mhm,
And it's like, it's really hard to work when you're homeless. When
mhm,
you're homeless, the work is basically finding a place to sleep. The work is finding a meal. The work is, you know, trying to find a place to take a shower. And
mhm.
if you can't take a shower, then it's really hard to get a job.
Yeah. Who wants to hire someone who hasn't bathed?
Exactly. But if we lived in a society that had those more basic needs that were a little bit more easily met than they are right now, I would love to see the types of things that people would be creating. I think there's all kinds of solutions that are hidden out there being crushed by poverty.
Mhm, mhm, absolutely.
Dun dun dun. Thank you for going down this depressing conversation trail with me, but I think it's good. We're working towards solutions here and talking
Mhm.
about it.
Yeah, no, this isn't depressing. This is just everyday realness. This
It's
is
real.
not, we're not being depressing. We're just choosing to not ignore those who are some of the most vulnerable people in our society. Like, that's the real tragedy. It's not us bringing it up.
You are so
It's the
right.
fact that they exist, and like that we don't have a solution for it yet. Yet.
Yet. I love that. Well, and so you are about more than just talking about it too. You are all about being about it. And I would love to ask you, you spent a lot of time at the protests in Boston that have been going on in recent months all over the
Hmm.
country, but you're closest to Boston. And I wonder if there's anything that you've experienced during your time at these protests that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I've definitely slowed my roll on going to protests. I will admit that I am not going to that many protests anymore. Not that I am completely against it. I just realized that my efforts are better invested on my platform, for example. Like I have over 20,000 followers, and I have a much wider reach there than I would if I stood in a crowd and held a sign. But that's just me, right? Like I'm just trying to take into account my particular
Yeah.
position and how I could best um, best represent this movement and be involved in this movement and spread the message.
Mhm.
Um, but with that being said, I still feel like I'm in a little bit of an echo chamber. So, so those are things to constantly try to reevaluate. But as for the protests that I've been to, I've also not just as a protester, but I've also volunteered as a marshal to try to be a little bit more involved, trying to feel out if like that's something that works for me because I am better at looking at things at a bigger picture, or I'm not someone who I know how to control myself in high stress situations. Well, actually, it's not really me controlling. I just get really calm and quiet because my gears are turning really
Mhm.
fast when stressful situations arise. So just knowing that about myself, I thought maybe that would be a good fit for me. But in the end, in Boston particularly, there are a lot of white people, and there are a lot of people who feel guilty right now. There's a lot of people who are really new to this conversation of the Black Lives Matter movement, and really new to realizing how the world was made, or not the world, the United States was made for white people and white property, and not for equality, as we like to think that it's made for.
Mhm.
So the energy, generally speaking, the energy at these protests is exactly that, like shame, guilt, but not backed up with passion. It's not backed up with conviction because all of this is still fresh and new to a majority of the people that are showing up.
Yeah.
So I think, people are mostly there to listen because they're still learning, but a protest is supposed to be like like putting out a message, like that you've reached a conclusion and put out a message. So it is kind of contradicting in that way, that so many people are there to learn when other people, like especially the organizers, are there thinking that they're there to collectively deliver a
Yeah.
message. So seeing that disconnect between the population being ready and how the organizers are trying to push this herd um, was a little painful to watch. And that's kind of when I really started to reconsider my position and how to better position myself with my contributions.
Yeah. I think we all need a little bit more permission to do that honest evaluation about like where is my time best spent in supporting this movement, because
Hmm.
you know there are so many different roles to take. There's so many different ways to support, and it's easy to get hard on ourselves about how we are or are not or have not shown up in the past. And you know it's a lot more useful, I think, to do this honest evaluation about like, am I spending my time in the most impactful way to actually achieve the goal that we're setting out to achieve, which is more civil rights and equality for everyone, equity. lots of different goals, systemic change. There's lots of
Mm-hmm.
big goals that we have. So we need everybody kind of on board and participating. But I
Yeah,
hear you that like
absolutely.
guilt and shame isn't necessarily the most, it's definitely important to feel that and to work through it, but not necessarily the
Mm-hmm.
most productive energy at a protest.
Mm-hmm.
I can see how that would happen. But I do
Mm-hmm.
thank you for
Yeah.
showing up.
Oh yeah. I mean, for anybody showing up, it's still better to show up than to not show up, right? Especially like if you don't know what else to do with yourself because, you're still early in your self re-education. Um yeah, protest is still a place to go and see and learn and just because there are people who are speaking at these events too. Because usually you get together, there's a speech, somebody's sharing their story or whatever. Like, this is what the BPD did to my child. This is what the BPD has done to my neighbor, like exposing information that's not publicized. And then, yeah, like just listening to that can have a lot of impact to make people realize because it's so hard to find information too, like, Googling things or whatever. Like it's so just going straight to the source is still valid.
Absolutely.
Something I'm also thinking about more is me as a prominent person in the glass industry.
Hmm.
I really want to take advantage of that position and impact the Black Lives Matter movement in the glass industry because honestly, the glass industry is so archaic. It's so behind. It's dominated by white dudes. I'm just gonna say it. It's what it is. It's very like heteronormative and like that there's a strong hierarchy as much as there's a community and that we're all like unicorns in a way, but in the end, like if you look at the facts, like who owns these hot shops? Who's the lead gaffer? Who's the one that is like doing well enough to hire people? It's a lot of white dudes.
Hmm.
And we've seen like past movements like hashtag Me Too, right? Where it shook up so many industries and exposed so many things. And when that happened, I didn't see any change in the glass industry. Like I didn't see any, it just breezed right over, right? Nothing had changed. Even though like a frequent conversation I have with other women or queer people in the industry is the incessant harassment and the extreme number of predators that we come across in our industry. So, that was really disheartening to see that, because it's such a niche culture and niche industry that it's not publicized. But
Yeah.
now that we're post blown away, if I can say, like
Oh
people
yeah.
know more about glass blowing and people are showing up and researching and following and all those things. So um, I'm really hoping that with that also comes more responsibility for the industry to show its best foot forward. And so far, I haven't seen much productive change. Like, like even the Corning Museum of Glass. I'm just
Bring
gonna
it.
put this
I mean,
tea out there.
let it out, girl.
So, like, I've reached out to them, like, via Instagram at first, just to be like, hey, like, I kind of noticed Black Lives Matter's happening, and, like, I haven't seen you guys post anything. And, first I get a gracious message back saying, like, thank you so much for opening this conversation, da da da. Like, this is something that we've been already, equality, something that we've already been talking about for several months now, and we're, like, just about to release a series of statements. And I was like, okay, like, I'm gonna hope that that's true. And then, they did follow up and like post something kind of giving a blanket statement about equality should be a thing, hashtag solidarity.
Sure.
So, at least saying that they're okay with equality, right?
It's kind of like the bare minimum, I guess, right?
Yeah. And then they like posted a couple pictures of glass art made by Black people, and then like reposted a picture of a Black artist that did a residency there like many years ago. And then they posted like a more extended statement on their website, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, this is better than nothing, but like that's about all I can say. It's like as a museum, as like something who's supposed to represent like the industry as a whole, it's a pretty serious responsibility. And if like you're not gonna say these things and follow it up with action, like actions speak louder than words. Like that's just how I roll. And so if
Yeah.
you're not presenting new opportunities, for example, like reaching out to Black members of our industry and inviting them to the museum for a residency or anything like that to showcase their work, to have an exhibit to showcase them instead of just a couple Instagram posts, like I really want to see more. I
Yeah.
really want to see more, and I know that it's possible. So I'm just trying to find a way to kind of continue that conversation. And yeah, I'm actually working on a series of animations, which is like totally
Oh,
different
wow.
from what I normally do.
I love it. Tell me more.
Yeah, so I'm working on a series of animations. There's a ton more like behind the scenes and process videos that I've shared on my Patreon for anybody who like really wants to know. Um, but yeah, so I'm kind of developing a campaign so that it's this glass related animation where people will hopefully it'll attract people to like lean in on the conversation, and it's asking people in the glass industry to sign a pledge. So the Glass Art Society, it's this it's a basically, what is the Glass Art Society? It's like a company kind of where they like bring together an international convention for glass, and it's mostly for like museums, artists, companies to like showcase what they're doing, share innovations, share new techniques, share new artwork. um, and so they put out this pledge which everyone knows about because anybody who's prominent in the glass industry is a part of these conferences for the most part. And even if you're not, you know about it.
Yeah.
So they put out this pledge saying a decade of transparency to hopefully end racial inequality by 2030, right? And the requirements are just like being public about that you're paying people equally, being public about how you present these opportunities, being public about how you're extending these opportunities to the communities or other schools around you.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really have to do much besides just being transparent, being open to the public.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't seen that many signatures from the institutions that I've worked with. So that's why I want to like promote that pledge.
Yeah.
Even if it's just virtue signaling, it's still a level of understanding and some sort of more tangible action that like I can hold them accountable to say, well, it's been 10 years and I still don't know if what you're doing. And if they are at least following the pledge, at least I know that they're doing that.
Totally. Well, we'll share a link to more information about that pledge in the show
Mm-hmm.
notes.
Yeah.
That sounds like a great thing to be involved in. And I'm hearing you. I would also love to see more transparency, more diversity in glass, uh, in Corning in general. I'm not that's private about that. I would love to see that. And another thing that I'm hearing, which is something I'm feeling too, is this desire, this craving for the businesses, the corporations in our lives, in our world, to be willing to go a little bit deeper past
Mm-hmm.
the virtue signaling, the mandatory statement.
Mm-hmm.
Show us that you truly understand this issue and slow down with it enough, care about it enough that you make some actual changes that do something to support the Black people in our world, in our
Yeah.
communities.
Mm-hmm.
Something needs to be done. And a statement saying that you already care enough is not doing anything for anybody, because if everybody's statements were already true and doing enough, then this wouldn't be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely.
so thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah.
And I would love to ask you, we're getting so close to the end of our time, but we need to talk about another project. You are so busy, Momo. But another project of yours, Self Love Social Club. Tell the
Yes.
listeners about Self Love Social Club and what's that all about? What inspired you to create that?
Yeah, so Self Love Social Club, we're primarily functioning on Instagram. So it is an online platform where we share ideas and resources, but basically the idea is that we're promoting the attention to taking care of yourself, to go the step further of just doing the basics to get through your day, but to give moments to love yourself because we need to heal in order to be the most that we can be and to then share and emit that love to the people around us. Um, Self love is still something that's taboo. People kind of think that it's selfish and that it's self involved or self indulgent, but it's really not. And that's why it's a social club, right? Because it's a shared experience of what is it that we do to go a step beyond just basic care. What does that look like to be mindful of the things that you do to yourself, the way that you think about yourself, the way you treat yourself? And how does that radiate and kind of ripple into other aspects of your life? So that's what we're about, and that's what we want to promote. Um, yeah, it's something that my friends and I started when Sakina and Papatson, two of the other co-founders, we were all artists and we see a lot of art. And we were at Miami Basel a couple years ago when we were realizing, like, after walking through so many galleries of different artwork, that we felt heavy, like something just wasn't sitting right. And we realized we really didn't like a lot of the art that we saw because it was exhibiting things that were so like lustful and luxury and like really specific like body types or really specific faces or things that essentially weren't relatable.
Yeah.
And we were wondering why, and it all like looked kind of very commercial as well, that it's like commercials are creating this ideal, and then art and also we as people were reflecting our commercials, and that's just kind of perpetuating and cycling into this own thing. And we realize, like, we gotta break this cycle because this is not healthy. It doesn't make us feel good. um it's
There's
not
the millennial mindset again. Love it.
mm-hmm. It's not inspiring. Like, looking at that art, what's not inspiring, if anything, it hurt. And so we were like, we are all on the same page. We are all also creative. We're also visionaries, and we really value community. And that we decided we wanted to present a platform to highlight that, to highlight those experiences and those journeys towards healing or experiences that promote healing. So yeah, that was like our main drive for this.
That's amazing. I love that. And I feel like you're already touching on it a bit, but how do you guys see self love differently? Is there anything that you see about self love, self care? You mentioned that people tend to think it's selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's anything else that you see in the general, greater discussion about self love that you guys take on a little bit differently. Differently.
I think there's a couple things that we do differently. Inclusivity is one of our number one priorities. We want all people to be able to see themselves in this act of self love. Um, a lot, because self love is really trendy right now in a lot of ways, right? But like, seeing somebody just doing like their own version of faux yoga and eating an avocado and being like, this is self love, like, it can be like really damaging to see something like that because like you might not be able to relate to that. Maybe that's not the kind of healing that you need. Maybe the things that you're struggling with, like a yoga session, isn't going to fix that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we mean by inclusivity, is like we want to make sure that it's something that people from all different backgrounds, from all different um, struggles, to be able to see and feel and understand and be able to think that, like, okay, this is a path that I can also take, that it's not just reserved for specific people, that even mental health, is still taboo, and investing in your mental health is still, some people think it's just like froofy things that like are only for white people, right? And like, because that's the only example that they see, is like, oh well, like I can't afford this like new vegan lifestyle, that's white people stuff, right? And it's like, no, like it doesn't have to, eating plants is not just for white people, but like, but that's like maybe the perception that they've gotten from all of the information that we're inundated with on social
Well,
media.
apparently, white people, we would just love everyone to think that everything is ours, right? That's the white people way.
Yeah, I
Sheer
mean, like,
colonialism. We get all the
yeah,
plants, we get all the animals, we get all the earth. Bye. Just kidding. That is not how I feel, in case anybody is wondering about that. But
yeah, and that's where representation can be so powerful. So yeah, that's representation, inclusivity is really a central part of what we're doing. And also, again, like we talked about earlier, like sharing new perspectives, new understandings is a point of growth. That there are so many people dealing with different types of struggles, different types of pain, but me learning about how they overcame that, and how they even learned about what self-love is, and learning that self-love is something that they deserve, and that's something that's worth investing in, and something that they could give themselves, um, really always opens up my mind and helps me to get another step farther in that understanding, and giving myself that fuel to heal as well.
totally. I love that. I'm hearing two main things. One is that the inclusivity, of course, but also baked into that is this idea that self-love, it doesn't look one way for everybody. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's not one way that self-love looks, and you have to do that, like, take a bath, eat plants, and post about it on social media and
Yeah.
check it off and
Mm-hmm.
say, like, that is not what self-love has to look like, and it's a unique experience for every one person because we all have different intricacies to the way we feel most loved. And
Mm-hmm.
self-love is just kind of this permission to give that to ourselves and understand that it doesn't have to look like anybody else's love to
Mm-hmm.
feel loved. And there's this community aspect to it too that I'm hearing, that like it's an extra layer of my self-love deepens when I can hear someone else's story through that lens, not
Mm-hmm.
only witness them and love them and their imperfection or whatever their journey is where they are right now, but I
Mm-hmm.
can love that part of me through them, and like the community, the way that, and I've noticed this too, that like we build each other up when we can be in a community like that, and we can learn different things when we're open.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. It sounds like an amazing club.
Empathy is a really big thing. To have empathy for another person who is suffering and is trying to work on that suffering, but also have empathy for yourself, that like, to recognize that, yeah, you might be struggling, and that you might need a breather and some time and space to deal with that hurt.
Yeah, totally. Well, and so people can connect with Self Love Social Club on Instagram, you said.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
We'll make sure to link to that too. There's going to be all kinds
Yes.
of good links in
So
the
many
show
links.
notes. Oh yeah. And I think I have one more question for you,
Yes.
which is about what you would love to see more of from people in your life right now. And also, what ways are you most focused on showing up for yourself right now?
Mm. Oh, that's a hard one. What do I
I guess
want from
it's
the
two
people
questions. I'm
around
so
me?
sorry.
um, I guess like to put it simply, what I would want more from the people around me is like meaningful conversation. But I feel like that's also something that I kind of already impose on the people around me too. By being sometimes too serious and like, wanting to talk about politics or something like that, or you know what I mean? Like that, I feel like I kind of tend to force that serious conversation on people around me already. But I wish that like I wasn't the only one bringing it up. Cause like there's a lot of important things that are happening right now, a lot of important change. Um, that yeah, I would just like to see more people. I mean, I think part of it is like very recently someone very close to me didn't know who Breonna Taylor was.
Oh,
You know what I mean? Like I think like just like moments like that like really
they-
really upset me. Really like, but it's not, part of me wonders like, oh, like did I fail to share this information? Does that fall on me for not educating this person? Or, like what kind of expectations do I put on that person when, I don't know, maybe they were just like super focused about other things. And yeah, so but I just wish that that wasn't the case, right?
yeah. Yeah. Well, and if you're listening to this, you probably know or have heard us mention Breonna Taylor already on the podcast. But, you know, at the time of this recording, we're still working to get justice for our girl Breonna.
Yeah,
Um, the police involved in her murder were only charged for the shot that they missed. And that's not cool. But we're still in the process of seeing how all that unfolds.
yeah, the police were only charged for some stray bullets hitting the neighbor's house.
Right.
That's what they were charged for, that it was scary for the neighbors that there were these extra bullets.
But
Nothing at all related to Brianna,
no,
basically.
even though she died, and
Yeah,
they have neglected to acknowledge that even through the whole course of this. I
right.
mean, even on her police report, they
Hmm.
said there were no injuries, and that's clearly not the case. And she
Right.
died.
Like someone's life was lost, but the only thing that was worth acknowledging, because this person that died was a black person, but the only thing that was acknowledged and punished in the courts was the neighbor's property and the neighbor's peace of mind,
Mhm.
not the life that was lost. Just very mind boggling results.
Very mind-boggling results indeed. And what I'm hearing from you, what you'd love to see from more people in open conversation is like maybe a willingness to explore things like this a little bit more, even if you don't right off the bat see why something is a big deal. Like going
Mhm.
into it, am I hearing that right? Like this, because it's like if you haven't heard of this, you've probably been living under a rock or like really just not willing to seek it out at all, I guess. I don't know.
I
I don't
think,
want to judge. This isn't a judgment
right.
place, but we're just speculating.
Yeah, I mean, for this particular person, like, I know that they care. I know that they definitely think that Black Lives Matter, but that, yeah, it wasn't to the point where they were looking into each name in each case, right?
Right.
Like, that to them, like, they know that this movement is happening. But I think, like, that those specific things were lost. Even though to me, like, yeah, I just don't know how the in my perspective, especially in the echo chambers that I existed, it would have been impossible for me to not know those names.
Yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. And I'm like cutting myself off a little bit because we are at the end of our time. I want to make sure I'm not pressing you too far past your boundaries
No, no.
here.
Yeah, no, we're good. We're good. I mean, I kind of expected, especially since like you said that it would be kind of like Joe Rogan style, that this would just kind of be like a an ongoing conversation. I kind of opened up a couple like, extra hours towards the end just because I didn't know how much we would spend on just prefacing what this podcast would be about and stuff.
Oh, I
So
so appreciate you doing that and coming with oodles of time because I if you guys haven't figured this out about me by now, I'm certainly the type of person who can have a 3-hour coffee with someone I've just met who is only a
yes.
fraction as interesting as Momo Schafer is here. So I appreciate you, Momo. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, yeah. And I don't think I heard you say in what ways you're focused on showing up for yourself right now.
Oh, right. Yeah. I am trying to basically focus on the fact that there are resources that I have right now, and some of it being time, like really flexible time. So just being able to exercise as much as I'm exercising,
Mhm.
um, which is also kind of compensating for not being able to make art, right? Which is a physical thing that I was used to having. So filling that physical void with exercise, um, doing more drawing, reading. I am such a slow reader. It's like I'm embarrassed by how slow of a reader I am. So being able to like consume as much reading and books as I've been, has been something that I didn't realize that I would enjoy as much as I do. So giving myself that. Um, yeah, it's a constant. There's a lot of ebbs and flows, right? I'm sure many people listening to this can relate that, sometimes you're at a high of like, I have all this time now to just like do my own thing, but then also the lows of like the void of a social life and the void for me, like the void of my career and those goals of making art for a show or to send out to people, or like that's all missing right now. So
Yeah.
yeah, trying to shine light on like what it leaves room for, which is learning and growing and pushing different skills for myself.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that you're finding a lot of ways to use this time that you have to love up on yourself and to explore new types of things that you don't usually have time for. That sounds amazing. And what it's bringing up for me is that, in a world, a capitalist society where we put so much focus on money, a lot of
Mhm,
people have lost sight of how valuable time really is because time
mhm,
is the thing that we can never make more of. Like, we just can't get time back, you know?
mhm,
And I love that. I love that we're being forced to make decisions and to see how valuable our time is because I think so many people are waking up to the fact of like, gosh, there are a lot of different ways to spend time that we never have time for. Like it's a shame to me, and I hope that as life, hopefully our lives will at some point can go a little bit more back to normal, as in like we'll be able to leave our houses without worrying about COVID and like, you know, that's just the it's like it's so weird that that is the least, it's like the baseline right now. There's so much going on to be scared about, like climate change and just like, you know, all of the unrest that is happening,
mhm. Yeah, it's a very turbulent time, but
you know?
I'm hoping that, that a lot of this will basically cause us or give us the opportunity to hit a hard reset button on a lot of things.
Amen. I'm here for it. Like, let's
Yeah.
press that reset button. It's so funny because I could go back to the Good Place show and like another example that there, but you guys, you're just gonna have to watch it yourselves. Okay, I can't tell you the whole show. Don't expect me
Yep.
to do that. Um,
So, do you have any final thoughts about anything at all? Like, that's all my questions that I've got for you, except I do have one little surprise.
I mean, this was a pretty like eclectic conversation. I think especially with like just having the amount of time to talk. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Being able to do this is great. It's refreshing to have this time because so many of my other conversations are very fleeting. It's like talk about blown away for 5 minutes and then talk about what's next for, another five and then that's it. So yeah.
We go deep around here. Like I can't do it any other way. And I know it's a big ask to ask you to clear out hours in your schedule. It's a big ask for anyone, but I just so appreciate the chance to linger on topics as we see fit and honestly, Momo, I could talk to you for probably another three-hour podcasts and we wouldn't run out of anything because I feel like I had to hold myself back on questions so much, and we're like over our time now. It
Yep.
is amazing. Um,
Yep.
I appreciate it so much. And so, on that note, there's one more final kind of like a game I like to play with
Ooh.
my guests. It's not as much as a game as like random questions
Okay.
and kind of like a cocktail party questions, just like talk about the weather questions, small talk, I guess. I
Right,
can't
yeah.
even remember what people call it because I'm only into the small talk after we've had the 3-hour conversation. But all
Mhm.
right, are you ready?
Yes.
So, what is your morning drink?
Ooh, lately it's actually just been hot water.
Hmm.
With like not even coffee, not even tea. It will just start with like hot water. It's just like a super easy, simple way to hydrate and wake myself up, but warm myself up as well as like the fall chill starts to set in. This is something that I want to, I'm really enjoying incorporating just simple hot water.
I love that. I'm gonna try that. I love it. How about a happy hour drink?
So I did participate in a lot more like happy hour type things earlier in the lockdown. Um, and I'm not a huge drinker. I can pretty much only have like one drink and then I'm like, I'm good. I'm rosy. My tolerance is low. Like maybe even half that drink
I
and I'll
feel
probably
you,
be like
girl. Same.
done.
Yeah.
So it was just drinking whatever was around the house. Like sometimes my sister would get like different bottles of wine for her like a work happy hour and stuff like that. But I had a bottle of rakia. I don't know if you're familiar with this liquor.
No.
It's really popular in the Balkans. It's I don't know. It's like kind of like vodka but stronger. And it could be like based on different fruits like plum and stuff like that.
Interesting.
Um, I'm going to emphasize that it's strong, so I would dilute it with different things. So whether it be seltzer, a little lime, or if I had different juices. So it was pretty easy to mix stuff up, but like that would be my base.
That's nice. Sounds
So
interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. And I'm also
yeah.
feeling very inspired to ask, especially if you're not a huge drinker, do you have any like go-to special virgin drinks that you love to make?
I jokingly call seltzer my favorite beer because I'm such a lightweight that it's sometimes just better for me to not drink. But that'll be like my like what's it called to cap the night. After a long day of hard work, I'll just crack a can of seltzer and yeah,
You get your little fizzy fix. I feel
exactly.
you. We are big seltzer drinkers in my house. It's become like a little bit of an addiction. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know. I'm like, what do
Yep.
they put in this seltzer? Because I only want seltzer at this
Mm-hmm.
point.
It's that satisfying, crisp, bubbly, just the hint of whatever fruit flavor. And honestly, it's not like the worst addiction to have.
Hey, if you're getting your water in, right? I saw
Exactly.
something that I really am dying to try, and actually, it was suggested by someone who I'm hoping to get on the podcast at some point, who is AC Brown, and she shared with her Instagram that she mixes seltzer water with a little apple cider vinegar, and
Oh.
it makes me think of like even a little kombucha type of
Mm-hmm.
drink. So I'm gonna have to try that. I'm just throwing that
Mm-hmm.
out there.
Yeah, definitely. I like really light flavors too. So like fresh basil or cucumber or so it's a little bit more on the savory side, but those fragrances are they never get old to me. It's really refreshing.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
What are you listening to right now?
Mm.
Musically.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I'm such a sampler. Like I listen to like one song from this person, one song from the other, or take, somebody will play a good song on their story and I'll like go check that out. So it's not really like there's like a genre specifically I'm looking at.
Mhm.
So I guess it's like not the most exciting answer.
No, it's fine.
um, yeah, it's so I'll have to just let me just look at my phone.
Yeah,
I'll just
tell
like
us
tell
who are
you.
your favorite artists you're sampling right now. I'm a big sampler too. I bet that our listeners can probably relate to this. We're
Mm-hmm.
exploratory people. You can't confine us to any one genre, okay?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, just like the most recent things that I've liked is Tidra Moses meets K Tornada, like a remix, Ghost Town DJ, Cashmere, Doja Cat. Like it's pretty. There's like a few like Japanese rappers.
Nice.
Yeah, it's really all over the place.
And you are always putting the coolest music on your Instagram.
Oh, thanks.
I always am like struck by it, and I don't know. Believe it or not, Miss over here recording a podcast. I am like not the most tech savvy person, so I still very much figure out adding music to things. Like TikTok is a little much for me. I'm still trying to figure out how to use
Mm-hmm.
creative tools,
Mm-hmm.
and so I don't know like how much agency you have in picking and like bringing music into Instagram, but whatever you're doing, I always love the music that you pick for your Instagram stories. So
Thank you, thank
just so
you.
everyone knows, go check out Momo on Instagram. And how about a favorite podcast right now?
Oh my God, I actually listen to so many podcasts. I used to just binge this one podcast called Asian Not Asian.
Oh.
So their tagline is two Asian guys not from Asia talking about American issues that no American cares about.
That sounds funny.
So it's these two comedians, and pre-COVID, they would just like crack jokes, bring up different like race-related news, interview other comedians. They're based in New York. Um, they both do a lot of stand-up comedy, which I'm also super into. Like that's like what I love watching stand-up comedy, like just seeing people perform, seeing people in their element, telling me about their life. Like I love all of that. That raw realness. I'm like here for it. So
Same.
um, I also love Dave Chang's podcast. He's a chef, but he also brings in a bunch of other people, like from all different industries. Oh, this is somebody you would definitely be into.
Yeah.
Um, so he always finds a way to find bridges between his industry and other industries, or just picking people's brains if they're like a professor or like an expert on anything. So he's just like a perpetual learner, which I can appreciate.
Hmm.
um, Feeling Asian. Obviously, you can notice that there's like an Asian theme to a lot of my
I love it. I'm
podcasts.
gonna have to check all of these out.
Yeah, so Feeling Asian, also two comedians based in New York. They, yeah, how do I describe? It's just like as raw as it gets in terms of like what they're going through, the emotions they're dating, being a mom or being single, or just yeah, just they're really funny and interesting and always bring something new to the table. And I think like that podcast in particular kind of feels kind of like the social void that I have. Like, I'm not living in a city right now, even though I'm such a city girl.
Yeah.
Like, I love just being able to interact with people. Just always having the opportunity to meet new people is something that's really important to me, which is one of the many reasons why I want to move to San Francisco. Like, I just love the way people interact. Like, it's a lot of like, how was your day? What have you been up to? And like, people are curious about knowing who you are. And um, yeah, it's just really different from Massachusetts suburban culture.
Yeah, it's cold there, and people tend to huddle up into their own little balls for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Different people ask just really different questions here than small talk in the West Coast. So,
Yes, I agree. It's a
what
different way of living. I would love to know also, what are you reading?
am I? So I do this terrible thing where I start like 5 different books and then I just juggle through them.
Not terrible.
Um,
Same thing, just so you know.
it's like, because it's so different from a movie, right? Where I can just press play and watch the whole thing. But books take me so much longer. So it's just kind of flavor of the moment, right? So if I'm feeling like, oh, like I'm going to go to bed, but I'm a little stressed out, let me read something to unwind. Um, I'm almost halfway through Ali Wong's book. What is it called? Dear Girls. It's kind of like an open letter to her daughters, but also talks a lot about like her career and being an Asian person in the entertainment industry, which obviously I can like relate to some degree and appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm obviously reading How to Be an Anti-Racist because hello.
Hello, yes.
Yes. But that one, my reading is a lot slower for that one because it's obviously dense. A lot of things that's totally worth the reading over again just to really fully digest. So very slow progress on that, but that's always on my shelf. That's a book that I kind of like to read more in the middle of the day, so I can kind of chew on what I just read for the rest of the day. Um, Kind of hard for me to read that at night because then I just get riled up and
Yes, I hear you on that. The nighttime
Mhm.
reading has got to have a different flavor than the daytime reading. And I am
Mhm.
also one to have, like, I've just started reading more fiction lately. You mentioned you were a slow reader before, and I was like, apparently me too, because I tried to be in a book club recently, a lovely book club called the World Lit Collective, run by Lisa Carter, who maybe you listeners will meet someday. I would love to have Lisa on the podcast. And she picks books that have been translated into English from authors all over the world. And I
Mm.
love the group, but I was like, I can't do this right now because I am so far behind. Like, you guys are starting a new book and I'm just starting the last book. So
Yep.
but I hear you.
Right.
I'm excited to be reading fiction again because it's a nice little like unwind at the end of the night, more so than
Mm.
let's read How to Be an Anti-Racist, which is already on my shelf as well. Not necessarily nighttime reading.
Mm-hmm. Audiobooks are also great too. Good to like take a break from podcasts, which is conversational and great, but sometimes I want something that's a little bit more streamlined or long term, or I'm just feeling something different. And so there's Trevor Noah's kind of autobiography.
Oh, that
What
would
is it
probably
called?
be really interesting.
It's called Born a Crime. It talks about his experience of being a biracial person in South Africa and growing up and what that was like because that was not allowed. So just living in that extreme, I think that's something I can relate to as a biracial person myself. Obviously, my existence wasn't illegal, but I'm still an anomaly in a lot of ways. So,
Mhm.
yeah, that's a really beautiful book, a really beautiful story. I'm not quite done with that one yet, but I'm pretty far in, and I highly, highly recommend that.
Amazing. Thank you for all these great recommendations. What is the best movie you've watched recently?
Oh, that's a good question. I haven't. watched like movies in a while. Like sometimes my mom will be watching something and I'll kind of like sit in with her with that. She hadn't watched Inception, which used to be my favorite movie. What did it come out like sometime in high school?
Of course.
Because it was talking about dreams, right?
Yeah.
Like, ah, finally, like, you know, because people didn't know much about dreams or, you know, like the layers to dreams, because like that's something that I experienced. And lucid dreaming was something that I practiced heavily late high school, early college. For those of you who don't know what lucid dreaming is, it's when you gain consciousness while you're in your dream state. So you become aware that you're dreaming, but you're still in the dream. So you can kind of push and pull and start to take control of your dream. That's a really hard thing to intentionally practice, but sometimes people fall into it because of recurring dreams or seeing something familiar, or suspecting something suspicious. You're like, this isn't real.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I watched that with her recently. So it was interesting to see that movie again years later, and there's so much I had forgotten, and it's such a densely packed action movie. I'm not a huge action movie person, but like this one in particular got me.
Yeah.
Great acting, but also like kind of it was interesting to revisit and realize like this is very CGI heavy. So there's just a lot of eye candy because of how trippy it is. But if you're really listening to like what they talk about dreams, it can still be like really eye-opening.
Yeah, you're making me want to watch Inception tonight.
Yes.
And what is your favorite color?
Ooh.
This is like a complicated question to ask an artist, I'm sure.
Yeah. Oh man, so like even as a kid, I always like would paint with every single color because I never wanted any of the colors to feel left out because I loved each one so much.
Yeah.
And like even like my favorite stones and favorite colors end up being very opalescent and rainbow. So color is a really hard thing for me to pick. It used to be like turquoise, that like earthy, really cool blue. Um, but right now I'm really attracted to like a very pale purple. So it's still like a very calm, but more of a pastel color.
That sounds
Yeah.
nice. Pale purple. And so this question does veer slightly out of the coffee talk, but let's be real. We go in here. Do you have an alter ego? What's their name?
An alter ego. Oh, you mean like a character that I like show publicly?
Yes. So my inspiration for this question, like for instance, is how Beyonce talks about Sasha Fierce, and she has this stage persona that she steps into. And I got really curious. I was like, I wonder, because I feel like I have one of those, and I wonder if
Yeah.
other people like really intentionally do that too.
I think maybe there's certain situations where I might kind of like turn it on for people.
Sure.
Um, I would say there's definitely like some social settings where like I know I need to impress people. Maybe they're clients, maybe they're going to be my future boss or something like that. So maybe like in those situations, I'll kind of play up like whatever inner diva that I have. But I she doesn't have a name. And for the most part, like I don't really bring her out because I don't it kind of contradicts like me being like be authentic and be like true to myself, right? Like because but I mean it is still a part of myself and it's not like she doesn't exist. So
Yeah.
that's a really interesting question. That's something I've thought a lot about, especially like with social media. Like I'm like, would this be easier if I just like channeled an alter ego and created like just like a separate personality, like you know, go all the way like Lady Gaga style, where it's like you pull out the crazy outfits when you're going down the runway and you act a certain way and put on the show that people want to see, but that like I can like close that door and be like, all right, not right now, right? Instead of what I'm doing, which is very I'm like in between space. um so yeah, something I contemplate for sure. Yeah,
It'll be
maybe in
something
the
to
future I'll
ask
bring
you
up
again
one.
next time. Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
we're witnessing her birth right now. Yay!
Yes.
And my very, very final question for you is, do you
Mhm.
have any words to live by that you would like to share with our listeners?
Words to live by makes me think of like a mantra or something like that. A very recent mantra has been, oh man, I guess there's so many. It's like as I'm like talking out loud, there's like 10 different thoughts entering my head. I guess it's just um like dialing back my expectations of myself, like that I've for so long I've been trying to like hardwire myself to always be thinking of the next opportunity, the next show, the next thing, the next networking, the next, and that's not happening anytime soon right now, for me at least, at least not as an artist and in the career that I'm used to working in. So I have to constantly dial it back and realize like, well, first off, like I'm not getting paid or compensated for a lot of the things that I'm doing right now. So that if I can't hold other people to the expectation of bringing certain things, like I shouldn't put that on myself either, right? That like this is a two-way deal. I can't the saying like don't let yourself on fire just to keep others warm. So yeah, just checking in with myself and then putting that on other people too, to make them realize like, yeah, okay, like this is like what I'm able to do right now, or this is what I can put out. Just I think that's the way that I'm practicing empathy for myself and also for others, by showing that like I'm prioritizing myself right now. This is like this is what I can handle in terms of output. And this is, yeah, just being careful of my input and output.
I love that. I'm hearing a lot about boundaries, healthy boundaries there, and like
Mhm.
being realistic and honest about what you can and can't do, and just kind of transparency around that. And I love the don't light yourself on fire just to keep other people warm. Yes. Don't do that,
Yeah.
please, because if you light yourself on fire, then you can never come back. And well, that's not true necessarily. I love how
Well,
dark my mind like gets so dark. I'm like,
you might have a little like you might have to go through a recuperation
you would
period
have to have a
if you do that.
really long recovery probably if you lit yourself on fire before you would be able to come back on the morning slice and visit us
Yeah.
again. And I
Yeah.
hope that you will. How can our listeners get in touch with you if they would like to? We've already mentioned a few different things, but
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah, I think easiest for most people is following me on Instagram at Glassy Momo. You can like learn more about me by checking out my website, which is momokoschafer.com. If you want to support me more behind the scenes, where to get like the real content, or collect my art or whatever, check out my Patreon. So that's patreon.com/Momoko Schafer. So yeah, those are like the main best ways to get to see what I'm doing.
amazing. Thank you for sharing. And we will link to all of those things wherever you're digesting taking this podcast in. Check the show notes and you'll have a bunch of links from this interview. And I just thank you so much, Momo, for coming and spending this time. I sincerely just appreciate you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing me. This was so good.
Yes, I agree. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Everybody listening,
Thank
and
you.
same to you. And we'll talk again soon.
All right, guys, that is it. Did you have as much fun getting to know Momo as I did? I just love that conversation. And a few notes before I let you go. First of all the links relevant that we discussed to get in touch with Momo, they're all in the show notes, so go connect with her. She actually just moved to San Francisco. Yay! So that dream has manifested. And there are all kinds of ways to connect with her and send her some love and congratulate her on her move and support her during this transition. I'd also love to note that we talked specifically about the Corning Museum of Glass in this episode and the steps that they're taking to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in their organization. Momo talked about how she had reached out to them, and I started reaching out to them as well shortly after we recorded this podcast, which was about a year ago. We were reaching out to them about signing the Glass Pledge. And now we're about a year past that, right? We're in July 2021 now. This episode was recorded in, I believe, July 2020. So I reached out again to Corning Museum of Glass to see where they were at with the Glass Pledge and what they've been doing in the past year. To offer them an opportunity to make a statement. And I did hear back from the president and executive director of the Corning Museum of Glass, Carol White, and she sent a statement, which will be linked in the show notes. So go check out the full statement, and they have an equity statement published on their website. But what I really loved to see most in this response to me was that they noted that a significant part of their journey is understanding the role they've played in creating barriers to equity. And they are moving forward trying to address those barriers that they've created. So they are working on this. And one of the things that I was most encouraged to see is an opportunity that I want you to be aware of, that the Corning Museum of Glass has started offering a residency that is specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. So that's the BIPOC residency. And I will leave a link to the page with more information and where you can apply to that in the show notes. I also want to read the little blurb about the Glass Pledge specifically that Carol sent over. So about the Glass Pledge, Carol says, when the Glass Art Society launched the Glass Pledge, we had just finalized and released our equity statement. We realized that there was still much work to be done to plan our DEI long-range strategic plan with an associated timeline that was realistic for our institution. There was a timeline attached to the Glass Pledge, and we were uncertain we could commit to all of the Glass Art Society's strategic milestones before we had thoroughly contemplated our own DEI milestones. Once we better understand our own plan and its timeline, we may very well sign on to the Glass Pledge, but we're taking time to ensure we are planful and deliberate in our approach to this critical work. So, what do you think about that statement? Is that the sort of thing that you like to hear from the organizations that you're involved with? I would love to hear what you think. Again, you can find that full statement linked in the show notes along with any relevant links. What's most important to me and what I'm really feeling inspired to take away from this interview with Momo is how important it is for each and every one of us to be holding the organizations in our lives accountable for what kind of a world we're creating for the people around us, for all people. We raised a lot of questions about what the baseline should be, right? Given the resources that we have. And it starts with each one of us making intentional choices around how we're using our own resources, choosing intentionally what organizations we're supporting, choosing to read these statements and follow up with questions and, really let organizations know that you care. So I'm here to help you do that anytime. And until next time, I hope you take very good care.